Well, this feels a little bit weird, but here we are. It's 11 o'clock, and I will, without a gavel, I guess I'll use my hand. I will call to order the subcommittee work session of the Education Policy and Administration Committee here on Monday, March the 3rd at 11 a.m. with respect to House Bill 131 and House Bill 781. Representatives Litchfield and Representative Hall as members, additional members of the subcommittee. In conversation with Chair Cordelli, I would like to point out that if we're not already aware, House Bill 781 is an early bill. Therefore, we need to take some action as a committee with respect to HB 781 no later than Wednesday of this week. 131 does not operate under that same constraint. Now, as I'm sure you have observed, as we have observed, the language in HB 781 as introduced and the language of 131 as introduced are identical, except that in House Bill 781, the so-called early bill, there is a section 2 beginning on line 9 with respect to an appropriation. To open the work session, I'm wondering if there, for the record, is there anyone who would like to speak to either one of these bills from the public? No, okay. Representative Litchfield or Representative Hall, do you have any comments that you would like to make as part of an opening statement with respect to either of these two bills? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. But
thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to say is you're absolutely right. The wording within these two bills it's essentially the same except for the financial distribution that we have available. At this point in time, I would like to ask the committee to please consider having some type of funding available so we don't put an unfunded mandate out there. The governor has just been elected. She has asked that this be a priority, and I would very much like to honor that priority. I realize that we only have a couple of days until we need to make a final decision on this. We need to get the amendments by tomorrow. But I would love to even reach out to our partners on the other side of the wall and see if they have an appetite for any type of funding as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Hall, do you have, in addition to any personal comments, do you have any, are you at liberty to share what the disposition of your caucus may or may not be with respect to either or both of the bills?
Yes. I think the language, so a couple of things. This applies to, it says school districts, so it's only public schools. And wondering if we should be considering charter schools as well. Or private schools or whatever, but at least charter schools, that'd be one thing. I know we talked about, the bell to bell and all that stuff. And I think that we really needs to leave that with local control. That initially, I think to start, that we ask school boards or board of directors or whoever they are, to set a policy about cell phones. Let's start there. As far as the money, we understand that our governor has asked for $1 million, but that doesn't pay for all students. And I almost think it's too early to be spending the money. I mean, I think we should start with a policy that says, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to have a cell phone policy and go beyond cell phones actually and include electronic communication devices, personal electronic communication devices, but not tell them that, just say it may include beyond it. So it's a cell phone policy, but it may include those other devices. So I think year one, we're not opposed to having money, but whether it's an unfunded mandate, $1 million is not going to get pouches for everyone. So I think our plan, our position is, if we could have have the language right now to say that this is what we want you to develop a policy on. I don't even know, and maybe you folks know, what does our governor think that $1 million is going to do? What is that? Because do we know that answer?
I'm sorry, we can, there are only three of us.
Can
so
we, that would
just-
be great.
talk.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, you mentioned $1 million?
Isn't,
Yes.
Isn't the amount in the bill 250,000?
The bill is 250, is it all right if I? The bill, so the bill is 250,000. The governor has put out there $1 million. I tried to quickly look this morning and I didn't have a chance. I was trying to look on the DOE to see how many middle and high school students we have in the state of New Hampshire. I don't know as yet, but $1 million, if we're going by what we had someone from Pelham come in and speak. Remember the pouch system that they're using, which seems to be the one that they're using widespread throughout the country right now. That's $30 a pouch. So if you do the math, $1 million divided by $30, that would give us 33,333 pouches. So I don't know how many middle and high school students we have. So I don't know whether that would cover them all or not.
So
do
if
you know?
if the basis of both of the bills is for the state to take a position that school boards need to develop and adopt a policy concerning student cell phone use in schools, which we were reminded by the next to last person who testified on the bill that we were hearing, is the next room with them, anyway, wherever it is, in committee, about the state's overall responsibility for education. Therefore, that would require, constitutional requirement would be satisfied and would be the requirement would be in no way in conflict with responsibility that the state has for overall education policy, while at the same time respecting, with the language of both of these bills, that the specific policies that are developed and adopted and implemented would be the responsibility of the local school boards. Do we have agreement with respect to the question of state responsibility? Do we have agreement that it would be appropriate for us to have the state take the position that school boards should develop, adopt and implement policies with respect to cell phone usage in school? What I'm trying to do is build this from the ground up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, sorry.
No.
Yes, I agree. Building it. I understand what you're saying. If I may, at this point, may I just introduce to you both the language that is in House Bill 2 in the budget? I don't know. Have you either of you seen it? What the governor has proposed?
No.
No.
May I share that with
Yes.
everyone? So, okay.
By the way, Melissa, would you mind taking notes? Officially, all I have to do is fill out a subcommittee work session report that I've just
Okay.
found out about.
Okay.
When I spoke to Chairman Cordelli about whether we needed a clerk, he said, well, you have Representative Litchfield on the committee and subcommittee, and she capably performed those duties for the full committee. So while there is no formal requirement for the submission of minutes or notes of this meeting, it might be helpful for our recall and reporting to the full committee, in addition to any actions we may take, anything else that may be of interest. So would you like to speak to this, the handout that you've just given us?
Yes. So the gist of the handout is the school board shall develop and adopt a policy, but it would prohibit personal device use by students during the school day and be implemented school-wide with approved exceptions determined by student medical, disability or language proficiency needs. This also, I believe it would go into effect within 60 days.
That's the last line.
Yeah. Well, you have the gist of it. It was just there are exceptions for 504 if you have an IEP. There, it also mentions the grant program to be administered by the DOE, which is similar to the language that I had.
So am I, if I may, and then Representative Hall, the act shall take effect 60 days after its passage, but with respect to the school board shall develop and adopt a policy, et cetera. There's no specification as to when school boards, there's no deadline by such and such a date. Is that, am I just recognizing that? Is that something of concern? I mean, we can direct school boards to develop and adopt, and I use the word implement, policies governing student cell phone use, but when do they have to do this?
I think the word implement is a magical word, right? You can develop a policy that the policy states that this will take effect in September 20, I mean, it'll be up to the local school districts, I would think. Implementing is a different story.
Do we put in a by after implement? Or no later than?
No,
School year 2026? I mean,
I think
if you don't tell people when they have to do something or when they have to do it, if I told my kids they needed to do something and they didn't do it, and I asked them, why didn't you do it? The response that they would give me frequently would be, well, you didn't tell me when I had to do it by.
But when it says this act shall take effect 60 days
Yeah.
after passage, if the act is, you will develop, not implement, you will develop and adopt.
But line 3 stands.
I know, but where is this?
Implemented.
This is from where?
Where did it, is this yours? Did you develop this?
I did not develop.
Where did this
And
come
who's
from?
this from?
This came from, the governor has put this in the budget.
The governor's put this specific language in the budget?
Yeah.
Oh.
But we don't need this. This is just what she's thinking,
Correct.
right? So that's why I think I'm going to go back, and I don't think our bill, whatever we decide, I don't think it should be about implementation. I think it should be adopt, develop and adopt, just like we said here, develop and adopt policy. Actually, so there is a difference between the
Are we
two.
becoming a bit too fine here by
No.
saying that the word adopt would include implement, so therefore we don't need to say implement?
Can I just say the two of them, 131 and 781?
Yes,
One's got enact
yes.
and one's got adopt. I think there's a difference there. I think adopt is your school board's going to come up with a policy and they're going to vote on it and they're going to adopt it. Enact is kind of like implement.
I'm sorry, where's the word
Yeah,
enact
show
in?
us where you're looking.
Enact, 131 says enact and 781 says adopt.
But is it, let's look at the language, if we may.
So I'm sorry, I'm being a little dense here, but can you help, what line is does the word enact appear on?
Oh, sorry, it's at the top where it says enact. That's
Oh,
where I'm seeing it.
that's-
under,
Right here.
That's just the title. Oh, well,
That's
I
just the
know,
title.
but
that's just a title that has
Right.
no
yeah, I
legal
the
understand
force.
that. I understand the title, but as I'm looking at they have
And
different
it's a
meanings.
synonym, it's almost a synonym of the word adopt. Because if
that's true.
you're adopting, you're enacting. If you're enacting, you're adopting. Implementing, on the other hand, means that you must execute.
exactly.
You can develop something, you can adopt something, but then you need to implement it
Okay, exactly.
or execute
At
it.
some point in time, the 60 days, what I was saying is,
You-
they both say it, okay, they're both in the language.
So
says
you believe
adopt.
that line 9 and line 13 in each of the bills is indicative that, well,
Wait a minute.
in 131, it says 60 days. In 781, it says July 1st, 2025.
Yep.
Which means that upon enactment by the general court and a signature of the governor, that either 60 days or July 1st, 2025, depending on which of these might make it through, that the school boards have to do this in the next 3 or 4 months? Is that realistic?
I'm saying, I
Yeah.
don't think adopting means that they have to, it says they have to adopt a policy.
Okay, so then the act shall take effect in the sense that the directive being given to the school boards is either 60 days after passage, they have to know by 60 days after passage, or by July 1st, 2025, they have to be informed that they now have to do thus and so. I'm just trying to be clear about whether or not that is the understanding that we have and whether that would carry the day. Or if that's not enough time. Because now we have two questions before us in my way of thinking. Develop and adopt and implement means that you're executing on what you've adopted. You adopt something, then you're bound to do something about it.
Mhm.
You may not necessarily have to say execute or implement, but it makes it abundantly clear that that's what has to happen. Then we have the issue of, well, when does it take effect? When does the clock start? What are your thoughts? Whether the word implement or execute appears in the language, we still have develop and adopt that we haven't disagreed on. It's there in both of these bills. And the clock starts 60 days or July 1st, 2025. And that means what? That's when the school boards have to start acting upon the law, or that they actually have to develop and adopt by those dates?
I say the acting upon the law is developing and adopting the policy. You were on the school board, you could, right? I mean, you adopt a policy, and when you adopt a policy, I would think you decide when it's going to take effect. When are you going to implement this policy? I think we're telling,
No, well, but
tell
also
me.
if it's something that came down from the state, they would determine when we have to have this implemented by, right?
Well, do we
It
want to
wasn't
leave this to rulemaking, or do we want to actually put into the language of the bill when the school board shall develop and adopt a policy no later than such and such a date? All right. And the act takes effect July 1st, 2025, or 60 days after passage. Excuse me. I'm almost better. So, so the dates are not necessarily the same. The law goes into effect in July 1st, 2025, or 60 days after passage, either one of those, unless we come up with something else. But that does not tell the school boards what the deadline is for them to develop and adopt the policy that they develop. Do we want to see them working on this for an indeterminate period of time or a determined period of time?
Is your definition of working on it to adopt a policy?
No, I mean, no, you could, a school board could assign a work group to work on developing the policy for that school district with an eye to adopting it if it receives majority support. If I'm appointed as a school board member to work on that subcommittee, one of my first questions is going to be, well, when does this have to be done?
I would think this date at the end is what we're
Do we
talking
want
about, right?
No, what I see is that the act shall take effect. In other words, if either of these bills, let's just say that we don't make any changes.
I know what you're saying.
Either of these bills are adopted, that means that's when the clock starts in terms of the requirement being placed upon the school boards. But it doesn't tell them how long they have to develop and adopt.
Okay, so
So are we clear on
we're clear.
Am I being clear?
You're clear. So I think no matter what.
Do we care?
Yes. So I think no matter what, we're going to need to amend these bills with the date, assuming that the governor had mentioned that she had wanted it in the budget, right? If the budget were to pass, when would that exactly go into effect? Is that the following July? January or the following July?
Uh,
When would this money
wh-
be available?
So,
If there was any money, if there were to be,
so the budget is for fiscal year 2026, isn't it? We're still in the current year and we've got 4 months to go. Therefore, the money would be available later this year into early next year.
so my
We
thought,
already are operating under the current budget. The current budget year expires, I believe, at the end of June. If that's the case, we have to adopt a budget for fiscal year 2026 beginning July 1. All right. So that's the answer to your question. If the money is in the governor's proposed budget, the money is there. If it survives,
right, yeah.
then that money would be available in the next fiscal year, which would be the next school year, because the two run somewhat concurrently.
Yes, I'm going to say, I mean, I really don't think we are ready to do anything with money. I mean, I think we're at a point right now that we should be just talking about what is it that we want school boards to do. We don't have enough money. There's not enough money, even with the 250,000. You know, you're going to start this grant program. The DOE doesn't know what they're doing. I think it's way premature to be talking about money. I think we should ask them to start addressing the problem. The problem is we need them to have a cell phone and personal communication device policy. And then from there, year two, you know, I mean, we're not adverse to, but it's just premature.
Won't school
for the money
boards
type- the money
do
piece.
what they can do within their means if there is to be any money spent? My older son's school district is Franklin, Massachusetts. I have two teen grandsons in the Franklin, Massachusetts school district. I realize we can start tossing around school districts here, there, and everywhere. But that district has adopted a full day ban on cell phones, smart watches, and tablets because they believe that they are doing great damage to the children, particularly in the learning environment during the time in which they're, of course, in which they're in school. There are no pouches, and to the best of my knowledge from my conversation with him, there is no state money coming from the state of Massachusetts in order to implement the ban. Because if you enact a full ban, you don't have to have any pouches anyway, or whatever they were called. I can't remember.
Yonder or something.
Yeah, whatever. So, also we have seen, with respect, as I've read the literature with respect to what's going on in the states, I mean, the specifics are all across the board, but there are states that have adopted laws that require their local school boards to develop and adopt policies, period.
Mhm.
That's it. And they have not provided any funding or laid on any other specifics as to any restrictions or exceptions. So it's wide open. We can look with an eye to what is being done in other states for our information and hopefully for our benefit as we look at all of those. But at the very least, it seems to me that we want to at least get the ball rolling here and make sure that we have that our school districts know that in order for our kids to have, to use the word adequate, an adequate and appropriate education, that involves the learning environment, and the learning environment must be free of unrestricted cell phone usage during school hours. So school districts have got to do something. I understand, and Representative Litchfield, maybe you know more about this than I do. I understand that some have adopted policies, others have not.
Correct.
I know that, for example, in Alton, Prospect Mountain has adopted a policy. I think that if we pass either of these two bills or something on the order of it, even without money, the School Boards Association is going to jump in and they're going to start developing model policies for their school boards to look at. And I hope it would be at least one or more. Unless we believe that we need to place restrictions in the legislation that would therefore inform the School Boards Association or the school boards, well, we can adopt and implement, develop, adopt, and implement policies, but they can't go any further than this, or they have to include at least this.
Right.
Right.
I personally think that we've kind of hit a point where we're kind of boiling over at this point. We haven't handled this for years. We probably should, even at the parental level, maybe we should have handled it at the educational level. But I feel as though the educators are screaming and saying, please, we really need your help on this. Will you guide us? So I personally feel that, yes, we do need something to be put in, minimum standards. And for me personally, that could be as simple as I don't necessarily feel strongly about bell to bell, fine, let them have it at lunch or study hall or what have you, if we want to be a little bit more lenient. But I definitely think that the schools need some type of guidance. And I think they do want to be able to say that it's on the state at this point in time. They're looking to us right now.
So there are two sentences following which indicate that districts are encouraged to consider exceptions to student use during instruction when an educator is using devices as part of a lesson plan, right?
Ditch it. That sentence should be gone.
Explain or speak to that, please.
Sure.
Because I'm hearing that there are teachers, a minority, but all you have to do is have one drunk driver on the road too, right? That there are teachers that are giving students assignments, and then they're on their cell phones during class time while the students are being given their assignments that may or may not involve their cell phones. So if we don't do this, what we're saying is that the school boards have to deal with that issue. Because all we're telling them to do, absent that sentence, which appears in both the bills, is that they have to come up with a policy. And then it's up to them to develop what restrictions they're going to place or what permissives they're going to give. Correct?
Are you talking about the instructors right now or the students? Just to be clear.
The policy is that may provide exceptions to student use during instruction when the educator is using devices as part of a lesson plan, right? If that language is retained, then that language must be implemented if the bill passes and is enacted into law. So whatever policies the school boards come up with, it would have to reflect faithfulness to this requirement.
Yeah, we heard from the testimony we heard from, teachers unions, from teachers, whatever, everyone in the room really, is that this was not a good idea. And you could have it, first of all, in most classrooms, they have Chromebooks. So the fact that are these teachers really having the kids use their cell phones for something that can't be done on the device that can be monitored by the school,
right?
I.e. their Chromebooks. The other thing you could have is teacher against teacher. Just, it's okay, just use your cell phones. That's problematic in and of itself. So I personally don't think that sentence should be there.
The language is districts are encouraged to consider, but the districts are not required.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right, so this is a may versus a shall, broadly speaking. What we're saying is that we would like school districts to consider as part of their policies making exceptions to student use during instruction when an educator is using devices as part of a lesson plan. But we're not requiring that.
But
unless we take it away, in which we have said absolutely nothing about it.
Right. If we take it away, they still can consider the only exception, if we take that away, the only exception is, hey, if the kid has an IEP, has a 504, ELL learners, medical, now we're saying you must consider those exceptions.
Well,
The
in
other
the
one is
third
a-
sentence, is it the third? We do in fact say that.
Yeah,
School
exactly.
district policies shall not
Right.
prohibit students with
Right.
disabilities from using a device to support their learning as identified by the IEP or 504 plan. That's right.
And that's where we
Those
need
are
to add.
special cases.
Yes.
And we're saying there's no negotiation on that.
Yes.
That must
Mhm.
be part of the policy that the school board is going to adopt.
Right.
Are you not comfortable with the wording that I had handed out? Because I feel like it handles some of that. Such policy shall prohibit personal device use by students during the school day. So they can use school issued Chromebooks, right? And then school district policy shall not prohibit students with disabilities from using a device, and that includes 504 and IEP. It also includes the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I feel like that's a comprehensive. Do you not?
Is ELL in there? Is medical in there?
Hold on one second, please. Students with, so
No,
would we consider medical different from disabilities then? I just want to
Yes.
clarify.
Yeah, because medical, if you go back to the other, if we go to, what's it, 381, what are we looking at here? Okay,
Well, it's interesting. I went back through the policies from, you've gone through them extensively too, haven't you, from the other states? And I've noticed that epilepsy and diabetes were specifically singled out. I think those are the only two medical disorders that I'm not
well,
sure we
rather
want
than
to get.
specify medical disorders, could we not say something on the order of, I mean, we're just brainstorming here.
Of course, yeah.
Something on the order of medical issues as certified by a licensed physician. All right? So, or do we want to start determining what those conditions are that have to be validated?
I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Okay, my suggestion would be, school district policy shall not prohibit students with disabilities from using a device to support their learning as identified by their IEPs or 504s. That's in there right now. Exceptions may also include the use of devices to manage students' health care. For example, glucose sensors or insulin pumps, just examples, or to support English language learners. So now you're including ELL.
And what was your
LD,
broad category before you got to your EG?
manage students' healthcare devices, use of devices to manage students' healthcare.
All right, well, so
Glucose
how is
sensors, but-
healthcare, how is English as a second language a health issue?
No, it's not. That's what it says.
Okay, where did the parentheses end for the EG?
Oh, after the insulin pumps.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry,
Well,
yeah.
so that's, so that's medical, and then you go on to.
Yes, to the
and
English.
the-
So it's,
Okay, so not seeing it was,
yeah, I understand that.
right, we don't
Um,
usually,
Yes.
I personally, to be honest, I know we're really getting into the weeds here,
Yeah.
but I would personally like to see some type of language where it's specific to they absolutely need this device for monitoring, because I don't want us to go down the rabbit hole of my child is anxious if they don't have the phone near them. I mean, this is a diagnosis. It's psychiatric. They suffer from anxiety. They need to have it with them. They need-
physician certified medical issues?
What if it's a psychiatrist? What if it's a psychologist?
Medical professional? Certified?
That's a good,
I would personally be more comfortable if we were specific and not put the schools in this position.
Of,
managing healthcare, you think, are you concerned with just managing healthcare? I mean, I looked at a lot of policies, nowhere did I see, and maybe you guys did see, and I always saw something along the lines of managing healthcare, and most of them specified
Like,
insulin pumps, most of them, and.
right. I'd like to be specific in that sense.
so
Well, maybe-
mentally, managing health and mental health,
No, I.
or just say health, and that covers everything.
You make a good point, like, holy smokes, if
So-
someone said, oh, my kid needs a phone too. This is the whole
The
point.
parent
manage
needs the
their-
Well,
phone
the
because
problem
the
here
parent
is when we
takes this-
start making these exceptions,
Mhm.
eventually it might lead to it being so broad that you can drive a truck through it.
Right. I'm just saying that I've seen other states actually specify
Yes.
the disorders that they are using.
Well, legislators have a
Supplement.
tendency to get very specific.
But if you want to, I mean, I would say if you have specifics somewhere, I mean,
I believe Virginia does. I can't.
the ones I looked at, they mentioned the pumps and the,
How did you feel about that? Like, I liked
oh,
that.
I'm good. I mean, if they need their device to test the sugar or whatever they're doing,
Did you? But
So the
with
school
specifics.
boards need to adopt policies governing student cell phone use in schools, but they must adopt policies that include these exceptions.
yeah. And that's
All
why
right,
I
so
think,
now we have to come up with, we've already got districts are, you're suggesting we get rid of districts are encouraged to consider exceptions to student use during instruction when an educator is using devices as part of a lesson plan.
that's just,
Melissa,
Yeah, I don't like that.
you don't like that?
I don't think they need it as part of a lesson plan.
No, in fact, I don't know. I listened to this English woman. I mean, the article that got sent around, and I mean, I looked at it, and I mean, when she was finished, I didn't even realize that 20 minutes had passed. No ums, no hus, marvelous articulation, incredible knowledge, well documented, and I mean, you want to talk about radical? Go to the root of. But she would just rather ban them entirely because they're destroying our children. My ophthalmologist and optometrist confirms that children's eyesight is being ruined at an early age. I was one of those unfortunate few who had to get glasses in the fourth grade. It was in my family. I didn't realize at the time I was only in fourth grade. But I had to get glasses for short-sightedness, at which point it wasn't as bad as bullying, but I used to take a lot of harassment for being called four eyes and everything else. But
Right.
but this is now becoming almost, she said this is going to be within a few years, unless there is, or this is my optometrist now saying this, unless we do something as
Exactly.
a society, almost every child is going to be wearing glasses,
so,
right?
yeah.
And that's just glasses. That's just eyesight.
That's why
That's
we
not
need to-
even what's
right.
happening to their brain.
Exactly. We need to get a handle on this. You're talking about that. We're talking about the kids have full access to a world of things they shouldn't. For example, pornography. They don't
Yes.
need to have access to that
Well,
unlimited
certainly
throughout
not
the
in
school
school,
day.
not at all, but certainly not in school.
Right. Exactly.
W-
I think we have to be bold on this. It's that important, and it's getting that late in the game.
So are you agreeing, get rid of that sentence?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't agree with, I don't know about during this work session, but in general, some people have talked about the teachers not having their cell phones. I don't personally, I feel like that's kind of an employer-employee relationship, and let the superintendent and the principal, I think, deal with that at that level if it becomes an issue. I would prefer to see us just dealing with the student body.
And that, I mean, it says governing student cell phone use, so the teacher's not really part of it, but, Representative Terry, do you agree that we should get rid of that sentence? Districts are
I'm
encouraged?
fine with getting rid of that
Okay.
sentence.
I am too.
All right, so we need to take a formal action with respect to recommendation. And Melissa, because I'm a man and I don't multitask as well as women, and my wife will tell you that, that is a personal observation she has picked up somewhere along the line. If you would note that in your notes and send that to me, that will be very helpful to me in terms of filling out the subcommittee report and then submitting that to Chairman Cordelli. So what we're talking about is with respect to both bills, we are eliminating the sentence that coincidentally in both bills begins on line 5 and ends on line 6.
Right.
The sentence, districts are encouraged, ending with the words as part of a lesson plan, beginning on line 5 and line 6 with respect to both bills. We're eliminating it in both bills, not just one, but both. Am I hearing us?
Yes.
All right. I need a motion.
I make a motion, need a motion to remove that sentence? I make a
Yes.
motion that the sentence, districts are encouraged to consider exceptions to student use during instruction when an educator using devices as part of a lesson plan, that be struck from the,
Lines 5 and 6.
oh, sorry, yeah,
In both bills.
correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
No.
Will the clerk pro tem call the roll?
Yes. Representative Wall.
You say wall.
Is it Wall?
Oh.
There.
Wall.
Hi, Representative Hall.
It's 11:40, Melissa, and you already hit the wall.
I am so sorry.
Over and I'm like, did she say wall?
Representative Litchfield, yes, and Chairman Terry.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Returning to the sentence, school district policies shall not prohibit students with disabilities. That sentence appears in both bills. I mean, this actually is our friend because it's in both bills. So if we're going to make any changes, we may as well, as with the previous amendment that we have adopted, it's going to pertain to both the bills. And Melissa, you have pointed to the language that you took from the governor's budget proposal. And Representative Hall, you felt it was important, I heard you say it was important that we include medical issues.
As well as ELL learners.
ELL.
Support ELL learners.
All right. So is there a preference for retaining the language in the bills as introduced? Is there a preference for changing it? Let's just start with that question. Do either of you want to just go with the language that's in the bills? You do?
No.
All right, well,
Are you saying end it with 504 and not have the medical and not have the ELL?
do
I like
either of
what's
you want
here.
to retain this language, period? That's it.
The
Without any
sentence is there.
change, without any changes.
But can we add a sentence after, you
Well,
mean?
we're going to get to that next.
Okay,
because,
that's what I'm
because
asking.
we're going to say that we don't want this any longer, as is.
So
You do not. You're not happy with that sentence.
it does,
as
it's
is.
not inclusive enough.
Fine,
Correct.
Representative Melissa.
Yes, I agree that it should
Okay,
be modified.
I agree. So we're going to do something now about the third, or what it is, the fourth sentence, the last sentence. Okay, we're going to do something now. We have the language from the governor's budget proposal, not as is without any changes, but we may as well open the whole can here. This language, excuse me, the first sentence in the governor's proposed language is identical to what appears in both bills. The second sentence, instead of utilizing the word restrict, the word prohibit is used. Correct? Such policy shall prohibit personal device use by students during the school day and be implemented school-wide with approved exceptions determined by student medical, disability, or language proficiency needs, which I think captures or expresses the concerns, Representative Hall, that you had articulated moments ago. However, there's another bombshell in here because we're now prohibiting rather than restricting, and we're prohibiting it during the school day rather than just during class instruction.
Where are we at right now? What line, what number?
I'm sorry, if you're looking at,
I got this.
all right, so if you look at the second sentence,
Such
such policy shall prohibit personal device, shall prohibit, not restrict. Restrict is in the bills. Prohibit personal device used by students during the school day and be implemented school-wide with approved exceptions determined, that is the policy, with approved exceptions determined by student medical, disability, or language proficiency needs. Such policy shall be developed in collaborate. Okay, so how are you with that sentence? The first key difference is prohibit rather than restrict.
I love the sentence. I think I would prefer to see the word restrict versus prohibit, but the rest of the sentence, I like it. How do you feel about that?
I think that now you're saying it must be, now you're not,
No, it's-
you're taking away local control right now. Now you're saying you're restricting cell phone or prohibiting during the school day. I mean, in essence, that's what we're talking about, but like some, like different policies we
Okay.
looked at, some of them were for this school, but not that school. Some of them were, you know, the older kids could have it during lunch, but not. This is saying here, you're prohibiting it during the school day. This means bell to bell.
Right, in the bills, the prohibition or the restriction is during class instruction
Right,
only.
right.
All right. It doesn't say encourage. It says such policy shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction without educator approval. All right. Now the exceptions are further down in the paragraph. However, you're correct. In the governor's proposed language, the policy is during the entire school day and school wide. It is far more restrictive and it is far more directive as to what the policy must say. We're basically, if we were to adopt that sentence, that language, we would be saying that all school districts throughout the state have to adopt a policy that is school-wide during the entire school day.
Bell to bell. Yep. I don't think, I
How do
think we
you
should,
feel about that? And Melissa, how do you feel about that?
I think it should be local control. Let the local people decide how they're gonna handle it. And, yeah, that's where I'm at.
So I personally think it should just be at a minimum. If we want to have local control, sure, but I think at a minimum it should be, we're saying top down during class time, no cell phones. They've had ample opportunity in many years with local control to curb this and it hasn't happened.
So what I'm hearing is that at the very minimum, we want to see that classroom usage is being addressed and restricted without directing school boards to include other portions of the school day. That's up to them what they do. We're not telling them that they can't make it school-wide and during the entire school day, but they must at least restrict the usage during classroom time. And Representative Hall, I heard you say, yeah, tell me if I'm wrong, yeah, because this should be local control as to whether it's extended beyond the classroom, but did you agree with restrictions with respect to classroom usage? And I heard you say the same, Representative Litchfield. Am I correct?
Maybe not. Hold on one second here.
For me, yes.
Now, remember, we're going to get into exceptions later on because we're going to get into exceptions for individualized plans, 504s, English as a second language, and
Yeah,
no, we don't need to do medical if we're okay with
the governor's medical.
if we don't, in the governor's proposed language, if we don't go with prohibit, we go with restrict. Let's just say for the moment, all right? And we don't go with use by students during the school day and be implemented school-wide. We could pick up the last part of that sentence and add it to the second sentence that already exists in the bill. Let me read it.
Yes.
If you refer to the bill, either one, such policy shall restrict the use of students' personal cell phone use during class instruction without educator approval and with approved exceptions determined by student medical disability or language proficiency needs.
Can I back up for a minute? That sentence on the two bills, not the governor's.
Yes.
Sentence, such policy shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction without educator approval. That was also one that we talked about getting rid of that sentence.
Well, wait, I'm
But-
sorry. We just got rid of that. Yeah, we voted to get rid of it.
Well,
We voted to get rid
To
of district.
recommend getting rid of it.
Both
Sorry,
sentences?
sir.
No,
There are
no.
two sentences there.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I believe
Go
it,
ahead.
No, the third.
yeah, what I had written down, and I
The
may have
third-
been incorrect. I wrote down that we would take out,
Districts are encouraged to
yeah,
consider it. We didn't get rid of the second sentence.
no.
Right, and
I would say, in my opinion, I like what you're
You
saying.
can do a cut and paste.
Yeah, let's just remove the without educator approval. Such policy shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction.
With approved exceptions determined by student medical disability or language proficiency needs.
Very nice.
I have to think on that one a minute, because I know.
Do
I
we
just
really
feel like-
want cell phones being utilized in our classrooms? Do we,
No.
there is no demonstrated over compelling benefit to students using cell phones. As a matter of fact, if I'm a student and I'm sitting in my favorite row and chair towards the back of the room where I can get away with most anything, and I'm supposed to be doing thus and so, and instead I'm on a porn site, well, we have just provided for that to occur, because if individual educators want to utilize cell phones in the classroom, how will the educator determine whether or not all of the students are actually complying and they're on the right website
And for me personally,
or
honestly,
app?
we talk about equality, and I personally just look at cell phones. If an instructor is going to say to the kids, use your personal device, I personally feel, talk about the haves and the have-nots. Like, there's a
Yeah.
disparity there. I absolutely don't agree with it. If you want them using technology, then use the school tech. And what floors me too, though, is we continue to hear, well, then the schools have to have a one-to-one device per student. Really don't, actually. For years, we had carts with devices, and you bring it into the
I'm
classroom.
sorry, with what
You-
harps?
Carts.
Oh,
A cart.
cards.
So you could have no, but seriously, you could
I
have a
thought it
cart.
was a musical school.
Now, I'm dating myself here, but I'm just saying, if you really needed
Carts.
the Chromebooks, right? You
Yeah.
have a classroom of 25 or 30 kids, and you have the 30 Chromebooks, and they can use it during that class. Most schools are issuing the one-to-one at this point anyway. But yeah,
Did you just say just get rid of without educator approval?
yes,
Did you say, yeah, yeah?
yes,
That's
that's
a
what I
definite. Like,
think.
I mean, the
Right.
rest of that sentence, I mean, I think that's really what this is about, isn't it? Isn't this about not using cell phones during class?
Right.
I mean,
Okay,
the bottom line. So, but get rid of them.
absolutely, because then we then go on to say, after sentence one, governing student cell phone use. Such policy shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction. All right?
Yes,
Okay, comma, with approved exceptions determined by student medical disability and language proficiency needs. Yes or no?
yes, except
That
where
is
you,
line one,
Medical
two,
disability or language?
1, 2, 3. Do you see
Yes.
the sentence
Yes.
halfway?
Yes.
Do you see the word with in line 3,
Mhm.
4 or 5 words in?
Yep.
Adopting that language with, co-opting that to this sentence, with approved exceptions determined by student medical disability or language proficiency needs.
Who's approving?
Well, that would be under the policy. That's a good question, but yeah, let's walk around that.
Because we're saying they have to have, because it says they shall not prohibit students with disabilities. So I'm not sure who's approving those exceptions.
I would, in my opinion, many of the policies that I've seen over time were with the approval of the superintendent or his designee.
So if that's the case, then
Because the
I think
nurse
it
could be the
should
designee. Do you know what I'm
Do you
saying? The
want to, do you
principal
want to
could be the
specify
designee.
that who gives the approval for the exceptions?
No, I think, what if we didn't have the word approved? With exceptions determined
By
by
student,
student. I mean, if the school board is adopting a policy, aren't they the ones that are going to, we're telling them you must make exceptions for these people.
it's
I
the
think it's
school
vague.
board's responsibility to determine whether or not the exceptions are approved or not within the areas of medical disability or language proficiency needs. Is
Yeah.
it not their, if it's their policy, aren't they the ones who decide whether there will be exceptions based on these three categories?
I would get rid of the word approved, but I just, it's gonna bring that question. who's
Well,
approving? I'm the parent.
I
can
could
approve it.
I could accept that. I could accept getting, yes, because it's already the school board that's adopting the policy, so why do we need to, it's almost redundant, right?
Implemented
It's
school-wide,
redundant.
with exceptions determined by student medical disability or
If
language.
the word is
proficiency.
approved is unnecessary.
That's what I think.
I think I see that. Melissa,
No, it's fine.
I saw you. I saw you with that.
That
You know,
puzzle.
I have this link, whenever I get, like, I'm thinking, I had that, you're thinking.
I do. I have
Well,
the
it's kind of
thinking
like-
wrinkles.
All right, so,
I'm going back to your thinking about the mental health, someone said, oh, they need their phone for mental health. I don't see that happening.
Why-
Forget it,
you know
because
what,
it's a
though?
mental health thing.
But
It's
I'm
that's
gonna-
why we're doing this, to help their mental health.
Now, I just want to go in the weeds a little bit further because
All right.
I'm looking at policies from other, I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit, but from other states. And for example, a student who is a member of a volunteer firefighting organization or emergency organization may be authorized to carry a device. Aren't they in school to be in school? Like, I don't understand.
well, as I
Well-
indicated earlier, legislators love to legislate. I mean, it almost becomes a form of Vatican casuistry. I mean, they have a word and a restriction or whatever, cover everything under the sun,
Right.
or the Talmud, everything is covered. I'm prepared, I'm ready to ask you whether you're willing to retain the language beginning on line 4. Such policies shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction. Excuse me. But eliminating, so therefore we don't need to take any action, but eliminating the words without educator approval, placing a comma after the word instruction at the end of line 4, and replacing it with the language in the governor's proposed language with approved exceptions. We can lift that with approved exceptions determined by student medical disability or language. I'm sorry, with exceptions determined by student medical disability or language proficiency needs. And we just lift that language, we steal it, and we put it in here. All right, so we will need a motion to the effect that the last 3 words in the sentence that begins on line 4 be struck. The sentence that begins on line 4,
Okay.
the last 3 words shall be struck and replaced with, quote, with exceptions determined by student medical disability or language proficiency needs, close quote.
Okay,
Consensus?
I'm just going back to the word approved for a second.
Well,
I'm-
you want to get rid of it. Have you changed your mind?
Well,
You-
I'm asking
You
questions.
have that, you have that prerogative.
Yeah. No, I'm just wondering, is this, let's say, I've got a kid in my class. Is this, I'm actually wondering why the word approved was there. I'm just wondering why. My gut tells me it didn't need to be there, but is there a situation where
Well, what's the
it
opposite
needs
of
to be
approved?
approved?
How
Unapproved.
can you have a disapproved exception? How can you not have an exception unless it's approved?
I personally don't
Okay.
disagree with having approved. I just think that you need to put approved by whom, and that's why we
If-
have New
That
Hampshire's.
is the problem.
I
Yeah,
also,
you're actually prompted to have to do something with approved by.
Yeah, that's the
If
whole
you
thing,
keep,
yeah.
if you retain approved, if you take it away, you don't have to do that.
Okay, let's take it away. I'm good.
So,
Do you need a motion?
you
to-
have,
I mean that it
did
gives
you
the-
did you get what I said?
I do, but does that give the parents the power to push
That's-
these I personally, I honestly would say superintendent or his designee. I don't, or whatever the word is we use for his these days. I don't know.
With the approved exceptions granted by the superintendent or his,
If we said
her,
designee, yeah.
his or
Design-
her designee.
That
Yeah,
could be the school nurse, it could be the school principal, right? So it doesn't, you know what I'm saying?
Because,
Yeah, because you might have an assistant superintendent and that's the responsibility of the. So are you okay with approved, retaining approved by the superintendent and, or his or her designee? You have a
it's just
problem
gonna
with
have
that?
to be, I don't have a problem with the idea. I'm just wondering, so you're in a class and the kid's got the cell phone, say, oh, I need it, I've got a thing, you know, they don't show it to me. Do I have to do I have to contact somebody and say, you know, oh, wait a minute, you can't use that phone? I guess I'm just thinking of the process, like, who's gonna
Well,
police?
a
this? That's what I'm
disability
wondering.
is a disability only gonna be for a day?
Right.
No.
Is a language proficiency issue gonna be only for a day?
No,
Is a medical issue
Exactly.
gonna be long-term, or could it also be short-term? And then you got to get the superintendent or his designee's approval in order to have a medical exception for somebody with a short-term medical need. And is that a big deal?
It's not a big deal. They do
No.
it all the time.
so approved by superintendent or his or her.
Or his or her designee?
Yeah.
Right, you got that?
Yeah, I already wrote there.
Okay, approved by. So, because originally, when I spoke, I didn't include the word approved. So now we got approved with exception, with approved exceptions granted by the superintendent or his or her designee.
Determined.
That's a long sentence.
Oh,
Let me see.
okay, yeah. Actually, yeah, because I put in,
With exceptions determined by. And then you don't want to use by again. You want to say with respect to student medical disability or language proficiency need, with respect to.
okay, so where's the originally by? So we have comma with approved exceptions.
Determined by the superintendent or his or her designee
Based on,
with respect to medical disability or language proficiency needs.
To student, with respect to student.
Medical, student,
Okay,
medical disability or language proficiency needs.
okay. I'm gonna have to go type all this as soon as we get back.
Okay,
we need this.
consensus on this?
Yep.
All right,
Yeah,
a motion? The chair typically doesn't make motions
that's fine.
in my world, so
Yeah,
you got, who wants to make the motion? It's your turn, Melissa, you wanna do that?
okay,
And then Representative Hall, you gotta second it.
okay. Is our motion is twofold, and that
Well, it's
is
in two parts.
two parts.
We're eliminating
Okay,
the words at the end of this first of the sentence beginning on line 4 and ending on line 5. That is without educator approval.
right.
And we are inserting,
Okay, so we are looking at the bills in front of us right now, and beginning on line 4,
With-
such policy shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction. We are going to keep that. We are
yes,
going to remove the 3 words
without educator
without
approval.
educator
We're gonna put a
approval.
comma
We're going to put
after
a comma,
and insert the words
and now we're going to insert the words
with approved
with approved
exceptions
exceptions by the superintendent.
Determined by.
determined by. With approved exceptions determined by.
Okay, determined by. the superintendent or
or
his or her designee with respect to
to
student.
medical
Medical-
disability or language proficiency needs.
What a
Perfect,
long
I
sentence.
think you just made the motion.
perfect.
Oh, I have to second it, I guess.
Second.
I'll second it right now to put that in the language.
Anything more to be said? We're basically doing one sentence every half hour here. So.
I know.
All in favor, would you call the roll, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Representative Hall,
Yes.
Representative Litchfield is yes, and Representative Terry.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we've already gotten rid of the third sentence. Oh, and would you also, could we agree by consensus that motion is with respect to both bills?
Yes.
All right. With respect to both bills, HB 781 FM and HB 131. Okay.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
about procedure? So is it our role to come up with an amendment? Our role is, okay, let's say we come up with an amendment. Then it goes to the committee, right? And then the committee discusses the amendment and then we vote on the amendment. And someone can amend the amendment if they wanted to. Is that correct?
So what we can do here is we can make recommendations
Right.
to the full committee.
Okay.
Those recommendations can just be recommendations, or they can be formally offered as
An
amendments.
amendment. Okay.
And when we make the recommendations, we're making recommendations as amendments. And formally, somebody would have to
Draft an amendment.
draft the
Okay.
amendment and put his or her name on it,
Okay.
right?
That sounds good.
The form that I've received indicates that in a more formal sense, we could vote to adopt amendment number, but we're not.
Okay.
We're nowhere near
Right.
having an adopted, an amendment number assigned yet. All right. Now, I believe what we have is school board shall develop and adopt a policy governing student cell phone use in schools. Such policy shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction, comma, with exceptions determined by the superintendent and his or her designee with respect to student medical disability or language proficiency needs.
Can I make a suggestion?
And if it's, well, let me just conclude by saying, if in fact that we do that, then we need to look at whether we need to actually, we can retain the language that school district's policy shall not prohibit students with disabilities from using a device to support their learning. And we can go so far as to say that, in addition to, as identified by their IEPs, plan developed under section 504, blah, 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 or when required to support emergent multilingual students with appropriate language access programs and services pursuant to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That language could be inserted in both bills, okay? And that does not change anything that we've already decided here to recommend. Okay.
Agree. If we could go back and just make that sentence,
Which sentence?
the big long one that we just
Yes.
approved,
Yes.
if we could make that two sentences saying the exact same thing, just exceptions may, I can't see it in front of me right now, but no content is changed on
Well,
it, but
the way
just
to
make
do
it two
that is to
sentences.
say, such policy shall restrict the use of student personnel cell phones during class instruction, period.
Yep.
Exceptions may be determined by the superintendent and his or her designee with respect to student medical disability or language proficiency needs. That makes it two sentences. You
Except
want
we
two
gotta be
sentences.
careful with the may.
It's
The-
not
the
a
no
bad
may.
sentence when you look at it in
When
Yeah,
you look
I'll
at
see
it,
too. I
Just,
mean,
can I just show it to her?
Yeah.
Sure.
that would be easy.
isn't this why we have lawyers?
Let me see, yeah, and I like that there too, okay, so,
Can you live with that?
oh, up here, I'm not, okay, wait.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I know, I went to school where you were supposed to use a lot of just
I mean, it's just.
imperative sentences and not have a lot of commas and semicolons and,
The other way you could do it, end it right here and say approved exceptions shall be determined by the blah, 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 blah. But
Okay, so-
leave it like that for now. Somebody in the other room can decide. that
any
it's not a good
approved
sentence.
exceptions.
Yeah,
Do you
so-
want to, do you want, well, let's do as much as we can here. Do we
But-
want 2 sentences or 1?
Do you think that's in this long?
Such a policy shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction, comma, with the approved exceptions determined by the superintendent, his or her designee, with respect to student medical disability or language
I don't,
proficiency. It looks good, to be
that
honest
doesn't look
with you.
too excessive for me
Okay.
in my world.
And I'm the queen of commas and short
Can you
sentences.
read the
and I
first,
don't-
can I see the first part? One,
Yeah.
I think you have 1 word
Such
too
a
many
policy
there, but
shall restrict.
The use of student personal cell phones during class
Are
instruction.
we, I just, as I think about that, are we telling the school districts, you need to focus on classroom instruction? Because really what we're hoping they're gonna do more than that, right? But by saying you shall do this, are we letting them know?
well, do you want to
that
insert
can
the
do
words,
whatever?
such policy shall restrict the use of student personnel cell phones at least during class instruction? Remember, we didn't want to
I
go
know,
school-wide
I
and
know.
whole school day.
Let's leave it, yeah, let's leave it like it is for right now. I'm gonna say.
I
leave
mean,
it right
you are sending a message with the words at least.
But if you're saying you shall, you're also sending the message, they're not gonna be used during class. So I think I'm okay with the way that is. And I'm thinking other schools may say, no, you can't do it during
They-
lunch, because some of those policies we looked at, the high school kids could use them during lunch, but the middle schoolers couldn't in the
Right.
same district. So we do want to give them some leeway in what they're doing.
Well,
I
and we
guess,
do
but
that with the word shall at least, but we don't have to
Yeah.
have at least.
I think leave it as is right
All
now.
right,
I think.
I can live with that. Do you think that school boards might misread this and think that we're telling them that we want them to restrict the use of cell phones by students only during the
Yeah,
school
yeah, I don't know.
instruction
I'd
time?
I'd have to see the whole thing. When we have the whole thing drafted, get one more look at it in writing and just see how I would interpret that. I'm not, because if we are saying minimally, I mean, I think that's the message we're giving you. Minimally, they can't be used during class time, right? Is that the message we're giving?
Right.
Like, forget what's written, so, I mean, that's what it says.
It doesn't, the language of the first 2 sentences does not prohibit further restrictions.
Right.
But it could be read and interpreted as this is all that they mean. They only want us to do this for school instruction, or they're only requiring us to do it for school instruction, and they really don't want us to do anything, and we don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. That's what the state is saying. But if you say at least, then you're hinting that this is the minimal standard that must be adopted in the policy. Correct? I'm not asking you to approve that, but that is a correct analysis, isn't it?
Mhm.
At least. And then
Minimally, you
it
must do
becomes hint, suggestive. You should be doing more than this.
Have you ever seen an RSA with the words at least?
That's why I think.
I haven't. And it could exist. I'm just throwing it out there.
I think we're okay with the way it is. They shall, like class instruction, when I'm thinking
Look,
about that.
if we hear in
testimony-
another year or two, if we're still here, that we got problems because the policies only pertain to classroom usage, and we got terrible stuff going on in the lunchrooms, and the school board didn't see fit to put that, and then they blame us because we didn't put it in the language of the RSA. Then we go back and say, okay, well, we fixed that. Now we'll say playground and school lunch period or whatever
Well, I
we
guess
want to do.
There's nothing that says that we can't run it by anybody else.
Who, run what by them?
Well, I don't know. Like, I would love to run some of this
Well-
by Attorney Fenton to be like, has she seen that type of wording before? And so, does it make sense?
Well, you could put at least in and then just strike it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The committee could then strike it.
Yeah. I don't think we
Do
should.
you want to
say at
have,
least.
do
I
we
think
want to
they
have a
know at least.
discussion at the committee level as to whether we insert the words at least? Or
Yes.
do you want to have a discussion at the committee level as to whether or not we strike the words at least?
I would say go in without the words at least. And just have that
Well,
discussion.
then
But I think
we
at
are
least,
op-
those are kind of.
We
weak
are
words.
opening a can of worms then, because then if anybody raises that question, then we have to start talking about at least, or what other, similar language. It's easy, to my way of thinking, it's easier to strike
Mhm.
words than it is to insert them.
I still
And
don't like the
this is
words.
not your final vote.
I know-
Okay.
I know that.
How about it, brainstorming? Such a policy shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction, and we throw out something like "and other times as deemed appropriate by." I don't know if we say the administration or whatever, but should we?
Well, now we're gonna have to have two sentences, because if we start adding on
I-
to two sentences,
I know we
No.
don't, just asking.
now you got a runaway train here.
But I think, if the three of us can agree on content, on intent.
Yes,
Right? I mean, that's a huge thing.
that's
And
what.
I think we are
well,
agreeing on intent.
Well, that's a big part of our task.
And that's why I'm
I
thinking,
mean, that's what the chair is
Yeah.
hoping and desiring comes out of this.
so, I mean, our
Because
intent is all on the same page.
this is viewed as being a consensus issue and not partisan.
Mhm.
We all recognize this is a huge problem and we need to do something. So if we come out of here with recommendations that potentially should carry a lot of weight with the rest of the committee. And that's the thinking here. Put the three best brains on the committee in this room to see what we come up with. All right?
Are you laughing?
I think,
I
I didn't even know you guys were there.
So
So, let me go back to way back,
There's laughing gas in the back of the room. It's coming out of the.
way back when we
Yes.
talked about,
Oh, I hope we don't have to go back and do.
We
all
do.
the things we already
we do.
did.
Well, when we say during class instruction, I mean, we're setting them up. And that's why it said initially, if you got rid of that sentence, it would be, such policy shall restrict the use of students' personal cell phones, period. Okay?
And
what-
then the exception.
Then the exception, I mean,
Well, yes, because
You know
then
what I
what you're
mean?
doing is you're throwing the door open to, you're saying you got to come up with when you're going to do this and where.
and it is not a district that's not going to start with classroom instruction. There's not a one.
That appears to make a lot of sense to me. Melissa, does that to you?
not yet. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure.
Such
you're
policy shall
saying-
restrict the use of student personnel cell phones during school time,
Mm-hmm.
during school
Well,
hours.
it just said cell phone use in schools. It just said that. So,
Okay, so we don't need to do that. Such policy shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones.
in school. Okay, in schools. And then,
Well, we don't need to say,
we don't need the sentence at all, right? The whole sentence.
well, what about with approved exceptions determined by student medical?
Oh, that has to happen, but let's say if you got rid of, like I said, I don't know why I went back. to
Well, first of all, the word governing appears in the first. Then the word restrict appears in sentence 2. There's a difference between governing and restricting. You can be very permissive in your governing.
Well, let's
so-
change governing to restricting. School board shall develop and adopt a policy restricting student cell phone use in schools. Then it goes right down to the school district policy shall not prohibit, sorry, up above here. What was the next sentence we had, Melissa? Such policy shall be developed in, school district policy shall not prohibit students with disabilities. So we go right from there, like you gotta develop a policy, and then you go right into, these are the exceptions that you need.
Do you know what's interesting is consistently both the two bills and the governor's wording all have a policy governing. They all have that wording.
Well, that's because we're the government. We like the
I
word
don't care.
government just initially.
Can we ask these folks if there's a difference between restricting
Governing
and
and,
governing?
you could have both words, governing and restricting.
Can I ask a question? Please? I'm just curious.
Yes,
Do you guys have a difference between governing and restricting? If I said, school board shall develop and adopt a policy governing
Governing.
student cell phone use or restricting. cell
wouldn't that
phone
be
use, does it
inclusive
matter?
of restricted but not?
I think a restriction is part of its board governance responsibilities. I think it could be interpreted to mean that if you say restricting, there's some level of prohibition, depending on what the following words say.
Yes.
You say governing this use of governing cell phone use during the school district, it could be our governance is you can pull it out and use it.
Yes, that's right. Governance is this, restriction is this. Restriction is a subset of governing.
But our following sentence says the word shall, says it states shall restrict.
Well, if you retain
Okay.
governing in the first sentence and then you put restriction in sentence 2, then the governance must include that restriction.
Okay, that works, isn't it?
So it
Well,
would-
do we still have during class instruction, or are we
No.
gonna take that away?
I say take it away. I make a motion that we take away during class instruction. Because that way it opens it up. We know they're gonna do it during class
Because they
instruction.
can do that, and
They're
they
gonna
can,
do
they
it,
can
yeah.
do even more, like
Right.
my grandson's school district in Mass that said goodbye, no cell phones anywhere on the school grounds the whole day.
okay, but
And they have high proficiency scores, by the way, but who
Okay.
knows?
yeah, but,
Causal relationship, contributing. All right,
right, but we weren't even comfortable. We removed the wording where we had use during instruction when an educator is using devices as part of a lesson plan.
we took that away.
We took that away, but my point is, so now we're going to get even. I feel as though we're getting looser by taking away during class instruction.
I think we're getting stronger.
I'm not seeing it.
The reason
I
being,
don't.
I'm thinking that if you have a cell phone policy,
Okay.
I'm the school board, the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to address class time, instruction time.
Do
There's no way you're gonna say you
you-
can't have them at lunch, but
do
you
you
can have
agree
them in
with that?
class.
do you?
I don't agree with that
You don't
because
agree.
I just know that, for example, we had a warrant article in our district, which is a very large district at one point, restricting the use of electronic devices. And the way that I saw it implemented was it was lunch and free time. I didn't necessarily see it during classroom because they may need it during class time. I am not comfortable at all with what we're saying.
Representative Hall, I think what you're doing here, and I don't mean to be at all critical, but I think what you're doing is you're assuming that the views that you hold and that we share with you are going to be universally held by those in positions to restrict student cell phone use. And I'm wondering if we want to have an opening that huge. Because you're not going to be you're not going to be the school board of every school district, and neither am I in the state of New Hampshire, where that view would be articulated and prevail.
Honestly, if they were to go with a pouch system, I think it would be easier for them to restrict the cell phone use for longer periods of time. Otherwise, the kids need to have access to the magnets,
Well, that's-
etc. You know.
Your
Well, then
storage,
let them go out and get a grant, and if they want to do that. I understand there's money for this sort of thing, and so,
okay, I don't disagree with the sentence, such policies shall restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction. I agree with that sentence.
did we keep that?
We kept it. I had said during class instruction. If we were
And we
worried
were talking about
I
shall
mean,
at
that's
least,
fine.
because we were concerned that
Yeah.
it may end there.
Yeah,
Well, so
It
if this
could
is
also
the,
have
if
a
this is the
sentence,
first time
yeah.
in the history of the state of New Hampshire that the words at least have been included in RSA, then we all will become, get our names in the Guinness
At
Book
a
of
mi-
World
at a-
Records
how
here.
about-
East in
How
there?
about at a minimum? How about at a minimum? How about at a minimum?
At a minimum sounds higher class, yes, at a
Don't you think?
minimum. It sounds loftier, it's more barrister friendly, so let's go with that, yes. So suppose you
Okay,
put
let's
that.
put it for now.
Such
This is-
restrictions,
Okay,
such policy shall restrict, such policy shall at a minimum restrict the use. Or you could begin with at a minimum such policy. Where do you want to put it?
that was such policy.
I put,
Such policy, yes, policy shall at a minimum restrict the use of student personal cell phone during class instruction, and then with the phrase that the clause that we robbed from the governor's budget.
the
proposal.
policy shall at a minimum restrict, is that what you want me to say?
Yes,
Okay, so. The policy shall at a minimum
restrict the use of,
Okay,
so you got the rest of it.
I do, except for, I want to clarify something, please.
You want to read the whole sentence and then we can tell you what we think?
Sure.
Good.
The policy shall at a minimum restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction with the approved exceptions determined by the superintendent.
Not the approved, but with approved, not the approved. We don't want to say the approved, with
Okay.
approved
Okay.
exceptions.
I'm glad that we're reading this. Okay. With approved exceptions determined by the superintendent or his/her designee with respect to student medical, disability, or language proficiency needs.
Yes.
Okay. Now, am I going directly down to adding in school district policy shall not prohibit students with disabilities from using, or I know there was a sentence or two before that and I wasn't sure if I was to use that or not. So the such policy shall be developed in collaboration with any applicable local education, striking that sentence,
No,
correct?
Yeah, strike it.
Okay. And
I'm
we'll-
sorry, I'm sorry, what are we striking here?
From the governor's, under, after.
Well, why don't we go back to 781 and 131, because now we're down to the last sentence. School district policy shall not prohibit students. Or, yes, or we can go, what's in view on the blackboard right now is that sentence or
Gotcha.
this one from the governor's proposal, which is far more detailed.
The governor's one looks good to me.
All right, so here's what we're saying. If
Think
we
anyway.
retain
Did you
this
guys see it?
language, if we retain this language, then we've already said that there are approved exceptions by the school superintendent or his or her designee with respect to medical disability or language proficiency needs. But then we are becoming we are becoming very specific in saying, in case you don't understand this, school district policy shall not prohibit students with disabilities who've already been identified as being in the category of may have exceptions. You're saying as a broadly speaking, school district policy shall not prohibit students with disabilities. So do I believe that creates problems? No. Do I find that to be perfectly fine and we could include that? I would say yes, unless I am shown the light in a different direction.
Okay, so
Are you okay with that?
the first part, the first sentence on the governor's, right? The first sentence.
Well, no, we're
No,
down
not
to the
the
last
first
sentence now.
I know you are, but to start with the first sentence, you just it's referenced students' medical, disability, and language proficiency needs. Go
Yes.
down to the last sentence, school district policy shall not prohibit students. There's nothing about medical there. And I'm wondering if medical, you know what I mean? So that sentence there elaborates on what is a disability and what is the language proficiency needs, but it doesn't, I think it needs to say something about medical. Like just to give an example, like add the, I got it here somewhere.
Well, is medical included in the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973?
Not
29
always.
USC. So you're going to have to find a way to separate the two and say this and this.
But on medical, it could say, let me see, just do an EG, for example, glucose sensors or insulin pumps or something, just letting them know, what are we talking about medical needs? I mean, I think I heard in that room, in our committee, that needed to be spelled out to give examples.
So such district policy shall not prohibit students with medical needs, e.g. glucose monitor pumps, yada, yada.
Yep.
and students with disabilities from using A. So so we insert that, right? School
Mhm.
district policy shall not prohibit students with medical needs, such as, or for example, glucose monitor pumps, whatever. What's the other one? And what was the
Glucose
other one?
monitor, and what else did I see here? Insulin pumps.
Insulin pumps. Okay, put a parentheses around that. For example, e.g., comma, insulin pumps or glucose monitoring devices.
Can we back up? Excuse me, exactly where does that, for example, go?
Okay,
Sorry.
do you see the governor's proposed language?
Yep.
School district policy shall not prohibit.
Yes.
School district policy shall not prohibit students with medical needs. Parentheses, E period, G period, comma, insulin pumps and
Glucose sensors. or insulin pumps.
glucose sensing, what are they called?
Glucose sensors.
Sensors, close
Or insulin
parentheses. Close parentheses. And, or shall we say, or with disabilities from using a device to support their learning, according to the language specified in
Just change that.
Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973.
You not like it? So I'm just gonna read it back. School district policy shall not prohibit students with medical needs, parentheses, e.g. insulin pumps and glucose sensors, end parentheses, or disabilities from using a device to support their learning as identified by their individualized education plan, plan developed under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, 29 U.S.C. 794, or when required to support emergent multilingual students with appropriate language access programs and services pursuant to Title IX of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's good. You not like that?
Yeah, I was on the wrong thing. You moved it down here instead of up there, right? That stayed the same up here.
Do you want to look at what
It's
I
the
have?
it's the next sentence now.
Yeah, and I was thinking it was gonna be in that sense, so let me
it's
look
only
through it.
the top paragraph.
Okay.
It's the new third sentence in the second paragraph.
And we
under
made it very simple.
Roman 5.
Okay, now, okay.
I did not put that.
I think that works.
Okay.
So we're approaching perfection here, but we have to remember that perfection should not be the enemy of the almost perfect.
Mm.
I mean, with the three of us and all the time we've spent, of course, it's close to perfect, but
I think we need to go back.
go back.
Go back to the very beginning when we're talking about cell phones. Are we okay with adding cell phones, including smartwatches, don't we want to just say other
What
personal
about personal electronic devices?
communication devices or personal electronic devices too, which could include smartwatches, AirPods. I always say earbuds, AirPods.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we need to include those
Personal electronic,
in there. Is it communicate, are they all
they don't all
communication
communicate,
devices?
well,
No, right, because
can you have communication? There's only one? Yes, you can, but
We
not,
can have
it's not good
communication with all
communication.
of them.
So what's the phrase that captures everything? Personal electronic devices?
perfect. Because
Personal
technology-
electronic devices.
Yeah.
Right.
I think our state policy of electronic communication.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Personal electronic communication devices.
That's
Communicating,
perfect.
that's the
Right.
whole,
Right, right.
that's what other policies had. I didn't make this up. I actually saw it in other policies that I
Well,
looked at.
I've seen that too.
Yeah, it made sense to me.
And quite honestly, I would say that I would anticipate that that would come up in the committee if we don't deal with this right now. So if we go back to the first sentence in section 5, such school board shall develop and adopt a policy governing student cell phone, or do we just want to say
And personal electronic.
Okay,
cell phone and?
I've got such
Other.
policy may also include, okay, so let's go, school board, blah, blah, shall develop and adopt a policy governing access, okay, in schools. Such policy may also include the use of other personal electronic communication devices such as smartwatches and AirPods. I mean, do we want to specify smartwatches and AirPods or just leave it?
How about,
Why do we need to, don't they already know what personal communication devices are?
No, they don't know glasses.
They don't
yet.
know?
No, they don't know.
And I'll even,
Okay.
not,
Have you identified those in your sample?
yes, that's, first paragraph, first sentence, the first paragraph, and all the stuff. Student use, we haven't updated this in about 10 years. Student use of cell phones, camera phones, pagers, beepers, and other similar electronic communication devices are strictly prohibited during the school day.
so I like the idea of if we actually say student cell phone and then we say.
And other,
Or how about including? Including personal electronic
and
communication.
other? Why don't we just say cell phones and other personal electronic communication devices? I'm getting,
Okay,
I mean, I like which may include.
that's right,
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. Okay.
that's
so
right. Can you imagine what something's gonna be called 2 to 3 years from now? And then they're gonna say, well, they're,
cell phone.
It's like the bill that wanted, the book had to be on a flash drive. What? Like, who uses flash drive?
We still have
or, you know, you have to watch a certain movie. Or read a certain book.
Okay, can we pause for one moment? please?
So, this is gonna, did we finally adopt this, did we have a vote on the second one,
Not yet.
amendment?
You mean the big sentence?
Yes,
Oh,
No,
can
we didn't.
Can we hold on, please?
because I don't wanna get too far ahead here. We're ready to go with this, but we have to take care of the other, the previous.
Why don't, may I make a suggestion? Although I'm gonna need help with this wording. It's literally a paragraph. Do you wanna just take a vote on the whole thing versus,
Sentence by sentence.
or at
So,
this
so
point,
here,
be comprehensive?
because we've done this piecemeal, this is a good question, in my humble opinion.
Okay.
This is a good question. So when we fix this last sentence, which is the first sentence, actually, because we're gonna put other electronic devices, then what we can do is we can make a recommendation that the previous three, that this replace the previous three. So we don't actually have to report the previous three, because we're gonna have an entirely new paragraph consisting of the three sentences. Now, we've done this one at a time, but yes, having effectively dealt with that paragraph, Roman 5, we can do a replace, remove and replace.
And
Once we take care of voting on the second recommendation, and then apparently a third recommendation that has just appeared at the 11th hour, and that is that we say cell phone and other personal electronic communication devices. But let's take one, and then we'll do the next one.
and
And by the way, we got about 15 minutes here before, so we
Yeah,
have to
we
go into
exec-
exec at one.
Exec,
yeah, can I ask, are we going to, our recommendation would, that this should be public schools and public charter schools.
We can deal with that. We can deal with that as separate, and
Okay.
yes, we can do that.
Okay,
So,
but we're in agreement with that. That's what I want
yes,
to know.
100%.
yes,
Okay.
Okay, so school board shall, I want to run
Yes.
this sentence by you.
yes, that's what has to happen next.
Okay,
Please.
school board shall develop and adopt a policy governing student cell phone use and personal electronic communication devices in schools.
All right, but we have to come back to that because we still haven't voted on the other one yet. The sentence that includes with, the long sentence.
I think we can do it all.
Did we vote on that? Do you have a vote on that sentence?
Well, we've already had 2 votes.
Well, then we did.
Yeah, we did. We
Okay,
voted on
so
that.
now we can vote on this.
Okay, before we do, I'd like to just bring up, school board shall develop, and we had discussed this early on, but Do we want to say implement versus adopt a policy? School board shall develop and implement a policy.
Well, first they have to adopt it.
Shall develop, adopt, and implement.
No, just develop and adopt.
Well, if a school is going to develop and adopt a policy, you would think that they would also be implementing it rather than not putting into effect. I mean, why do you adopt a policy if you're not going to do anything with it?
But that's up to them,
Well, that's up to
not
them.
up to us, right?
I've always preferred just adopt the policy.
Yeah.
Right.
We're going, of course, we're going.
Okay, but you know me, like I even have my note in my note the word consequences.
Yeah, I don't think it should be.
You don't foresee any difficulties if we do not use the word implement, because you believe that if policies are, if we direct that they be adopted, that they will in fact be implemented, and that we're not going to be sitting here
Direct somebody.
a year from now saying, well, they didn't implement it because they didn't think they had to. Okay.
Failure to implement would be in a minute, would be in
Yeah.
a minute. that-
Yes. Okay.
Oh, yeah. You're gonna be in the other room, 206, what is it, 205, 207?
Okay.
They'll- Okay, yeah, this is like a sub meeting over
No,
here.
this is far worse than a caucus. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry.
All right, school board shall
So
develop
we
and
voted
adopt.
the first, we voted the second, now we've got a replace the first sentence with the following sentence. Such boards shall develop and adopt a policy governing student cell phone and other personal electronic communication device usage in schools.
You want the word other personal? I have and personal.
All right, and.
Read what you have, because you
Sure.
started to read it, sounds good.
School boards shall develop and adopt a policy governing student cell phone use and personal electronic communication devices in schools. The policy shall, at a minimum, restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction, with approved exceptions determined by the superintendent or his or her designee with respect to student medical disability or language proficiency needs. Then it goes on to say school district policy shall not prohibit students with medical needs and the disabilities.
And I think the very first, it should say, which may include the smartwatches. Do we want to,
Do we have to, those are personal communication devices.
but maybe they don't want to go there. Maybe, what if a school district didn't want to go into?
Well, then they can
the
say
earbuds?
that they're exempting. You're, by not identifying the device, you're not saying that that device cannot be utilized. You're just
Here's
saying
the,
other.
Okay.
You are identifying cell phones and saying you cannot evade doing something about cell phones. You can't evade this. But other personal devices are ones that you as a school board will have to specify.
But doesn't that say and? What does it say in the first sentence?
and shall develop and the, okay. School board shall develop and adopt a policy governing student cell phone use and personal electronic
Well,
communication
So
devices.
they've got to include the personal in there.
They need
Okay.
to,
Yes.
All right, okay.
yeah, because you can respond back and forth to text
So-
with smartwatch.
So do we really? So school board should develop and adopt a policy governing school cell phone use. Okay, we do need to say in schools because it's the first sentence. All right,
Oh,
fine.
wait a minute, I'm sorry, in public and charter schools? Is that where?
In
we're
School,
looking for-
public-
public school doesn't, I mean, charter school doesn't have a school board, right? They have a board of directors,
Oh, shoot, okay.
board of trustees. So that's why you gotta be, we can't do school boards.
School governing bodies? A school board is a governing body. A board of trustees is a governing. School governing bodies, would that
Looking it
suffice?
up.
But the administration's not, is that good?
For you and me, yeah. For everybody else out there, don't worry.
I do too.
Give me one second.
Okay. Well, he's doing that.
What, every school has a governing body.
True.
I just want to make sure that we've got medical, disability, and language. Those are all down here. You know what I mean? Or if we identify the medical.
Or Board of
here,
Trustees
and
of
then just
charter,
define
public charter
disability and
schools.
Language down here. Like, I think it would be great if we could just do the three here and define them down here.
All right, so the suggestion is that we indeed be specific rather than use the term governing bodies. We say school boards or Board of Trustees of a chartered public school.
Okay, so wait, so school boards or the Board of Trustees.
Of chartered public, well, no,
Okay.
you're going from plural to singular here. So of chartered public schools. Shall develop and adopt a policy governing student cell phone use in schools.
Okay, so,
Right.
school boards, okay, am I capitalizing the C in charter public schools? Or
No.
No, right, okay. So school boards or the Board of Trustees of chartered public schools shall develop and adopt a policy governing student cell phone use and personal electronic communication devices in schools.
Well, the word use, cell phone, or personal, the use, like we get phone use, and then we just got the devices hanging on the end. Do we want the word use after phone?
Student cell phone use and,
See what I'm saying?
Usage?
No.
Usages?
Use isn't the word. I mean, use is okay, but it sounds like cell phone use
I think she's,
or devices.
No, it's not or, it's and.
Oh, and devices.
yeah. Can you see it?
Yeah, actually, put it right here. Let's see. Well, then you got to have and the use of, you know what I mean? You got the word.
I
word-
thought of that, I just wasn't sure if it was
Yeah,
redundant.
the word use or governing student cell phone and personal, again, you can't have use away over there though either. How about the use of? Governing
about the use-
of
how about the-
student cell phones?
How
and
about the
personal-
usages? The usages of school, the usages of, adopt a policy governing the usages of student cell phones and other electronic personal communication devices.
Cell phone is
Yes.
singular though, so.
You got
I
usage,
think
are you okay with usages?
It's not a very pretty word.
How about the use of? The use of.
All right, use of.
Use of personal student cell phone
Student
And-
cell phones.
And other personal
and personal
electronic communication devices
Okay,
in schools.
okay.
All right?
Yeah, that works. If you get the word use, those other things was
Do
hanging.
do you actually have that?
I do, but I do two more questions though before we, all right.
Before
but-
we vote on that sentence?
Oh, no, we can vote on the
Can we
second.
vote on the sentence?
All right, so, yes, but I'm just gonna redo that.
And that will
part.
be before we vote on entirely
Surprised
remove
by-
and replace.
I'm still baffled that we have to vote on sentence by sentence, and we did the. I've been on
Well,
subcommittee
because we
for
didn't know how
years.
far we were gonna go with this. It is now clear that since we have torn the whole paragraph apart, that we're gonna do a remove and replace, and that's the only thing that we're gonna have to report to
Yep.
the committee, not that we did this, and we don't have to do a play-by-play.
Okay,
In my view, what we're gonna do is ultimately, we're gonna send one recommendation to the full committee. It's a remove and replace paragraph Roman 5 with the following language. Okay?
Yep.
So we need to vote on that sentence and then we can vote on the remove and replace.
all right, school boards or the Board of Trustees of charter public schools shall develop and adopt a policy governing the use of student cell phones and personal electronic.
And
commu-
other. Sorry,
It's okay.
just didn't want you to.
Okay. School boards or the Board of Trustees of charter public schools shall develop and adopt a policy governing the use of student cell phones and other personal electronic communication devices in schools.
Sir?
And,
And.
okay.
I don't think you need to read the sentence back, just because you changed the word or to and, but,
Go
Oh,
ahead, start from
shoot.
the top.
yeah, do we have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, you gotta call the roll.
Okay, Representative Hall,
Yes,
Representative Litchfield is yes, Representative Terry.
Yes. Now, now we can do a remove and replace, which will be the reportable recommendation to the full committee. Now, and then the final one is we have to decide what we're gonna do with the date, and then we have to decide what we're gonna do with these bills.
And the appropriation. You guys don't want an appropriation, do you?
no. I just think
So,
it's premature.
Well, so Chairman Cordelli has recommended that once we finish all of our wordsmithing here today, that we recommend that the early bill be retained. That preserves it. And we don't have to act on that bill. His preference is that we continue to give the full committee an opportunity to work with both the bills and decide what they want to do. So regardless, we can make a recommendation, but that is his personal preference.
Yep.
That we do not choose one of these two bills and say we recommend this bill over the other bill, because they're identical. And we kick it upstairs where that decision should be made. Upstairs meaning the full committee. That's where the decision should be made. So we have three things to do here, 2 or 3. We're going to remove and replace with all of these changes, and it'll be a new 5. So a motion to the effect that we remove and replace section 5, Roman 5, with the previous 3 adopted changes. Then gets us a clean paragraph to send over.
Can you, Representative Litchfield, read the whole thing? Just the whole thing as is right now. It should be, right now, this is what we're going to send to the committee.
School boards and the Board of Trustees of chartered public schools shall develop and adopt a policy governing the use of student cell phones and other personal electronic communication devices in schools. The policy shall, at a minimum, restrict the use of student personal cell phones during class instruction, with approved exceptions determined by the superintendent or his/her designee with respect to student medical, disability, or language proficiency needs. School district policy shall not prohibit students with medical needs, parentheses, e.g. insulin pumps and glucose sensors, close parentheses, or disabilities from using a device to support their learning as identified by their individualized education program plan developed under Section 504 of the Rehab Act of 1973, 29 U.S.C. 794, or when required to support emergent multilingual students with appropriate language access programs and services pursuant to the Title IX of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's it.
Is there a motion to adopt that as the remove and replace language for Roman 5?
Okay.
I don't know whose turn it is.
Sure. So moved.
Okay, second.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Oh, ready to call the roll?
Representative Hall,
Yes.
Representative Litchfield is yes. Representative Terry,
Yes.
okay, so that's unanimous.
Just to keep this clean, I'm going to recommend that we rescind the actions that we took with respect to the first 3 votes. We can just get rid of those now because we've already done this. So if I could have a motion to the effect that we rescind the actions that we took with respect to all previous actions previous to the motion to remove and replace.
I make a motion that we.
Is there a
rescind those.
second?
I'll second.
Are we ready to vote? Okay,
Yes.
Representative
Representative Hall,
Yes.
Representative Litchfield, yes.
Yes.
Representative Terry, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Do we want to do anything with the effective dates? one is 60 days, the other is July 1st, 2025. If we vote to retain 131, no, 781 FN, we don't really need to bother with that. That is something that the full committee can do fairly easily, is determine what date it wants.
Can I ask, see if it makes a difference? Barrett, in
With
terms
respect
of-
to
in
July
terms of-
1 or 7 or 60 days?
60 days would be better, versus what you know, what takes time. You know, say 60 days after pass, let's say that gets us up to, let's just say the bill was signed into law on June 30th, then August 30th.
Yep.
We could try and pump out a sample policy prior to that. The School Boards Association preference would be January 1, 26. So we give school boards a fall to work on the sample. Well, with NHSBA, 2 months over the summer, develop a sample policy, and send it out to our members, and they have to fall to work on it, get it adopted. Policy process does not just happen like that. You know, representative goes to a committee, then it goes to the full board, then it comes back to questions, they talk to legal, they call NHSBA, you want to make this change, is that allowable? There's 2 or 3 iterations of a policy that goes through the same way we're working here through the bill. There's 2 or 3 iterations of policy that the school board goes through before it becomes effective, and then before the board adopts it. Our preference is always January 1 of the following, 6 months before, and I know we don't want to delay this a whole year out. I understand that. January 1 would be NHSBA's preference. We can definitely make that work. If you move it 90 days after passage, it's a little, it depends on when it gets signed into law, you know.
I can't imagine that this is going to get signed into law very, very late. I would expect that it would be signed into law.
With it being governor's priorities.
So 60 days is going to give you plenty of time. Or do you want a date?
May I just suggest, I personally think we should keep it clean and it should be either implemented prior to the first day of school or the beginning of the second semester of the school year, because this is going to be, it's going to be a huge culture shock. I don't think, like, let's say mid-October makes sense. Do you know what I'm saying? I think it should be a clean cut.
But once again, we had the discussion, hours ago. The act shall take effect on such and such a date. That doesn't mean that the policy is going to go into effect on that date, because that's the date when the school boards are notified that they have to do this. So they have to be given sufficient time in order to develop and to adopt the policy. So we want an earlier date rather than a later date, because it's already going to take time to develop and adopt the policy.
Sure, if the bill becomes effective 60 days after that, that's fine, but, and not to undo the work, but if you say by January 1, 2026, the board shall have a policy.
Well, no, but before you came, we put an X through that.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I'm just telling you from an implementation standpoint.
Because you said, I believe you said that with respect to adopt, that there would be compliance, and that they weren't going to push. It's unlikely they'd be pushing out the effective date of the school's policy for 2 or 3 years.
No, I
Okay.
it takes a school board 3 or 4 months to properly consider and adopt the policy.
Yes.
Yeah. So if the bill were to become effective August 1st, say, does that mean that the policy has to be in place by the first day of school?
I don't know how it could be. That's only 4 weeks.
Correct. So my point is just, I guess my question is at what date does the school board have to have the policy adopted?
Well, we didn't address that.
Okay. So when we were talking about effective date, and I read effective date, I feel that's when the school board shall have a policy. That's how we've always interpreted.
So if it says the act shall take effect, that means that's when the policy shall be in place. That's how you're interpreting that?
Because the act is, I'm sorry,
The act is
the act
the
is
direct.
asking you to develop a policy.
The act is telling you to develop a policy. It doesn't tell you when you have to have the policy in place.
never interpreted that way. I understand what you're saying, I appreciate that. We've, at the School Board Association, we've always interpreted, if the bill says effective 60 days after passage and then requires a policy within that bill, we've always interpreted that we kind of have to push out a policy, have a policy ready to go by those 60 days.
Well, if that's the common practice and a common understanding, then all we have to do is decide when we want this to be implemented, because then we'll make that the effective date. That the act shall take effect 90 days after passage, 60 days after passage, or a date certain.
Can I ask another question? So, I mean, is it reasonable to think that in September of 2025, that this would be ready to go? Okay, so,
I mean, unless it's signed into law by Easter, which we know is not gonna happen.
right, okay.
You know,
January 1?
But-
January 1?
that was-
But let me ask you this. Here's part of where I'm lost on this is I personally think it should be the week before Labor Day, right? Because that's when I know it's soon, but I'm just saying it's no secret that this is out there. The governor has been saying this for the past several weeks.
That doesn't mean anybody's been doing anything about
But,
it.
right, but it just sounds so reactive. I don't understand why it wouldn't be on the school board's radar or why we couldn't start working on policies now. I know you need the exact wording, but
Well-
they're gonna have some idea between once it goes through the Senate. No? Oh,
So
right,
if
yeah.
this bill were signed into law in April,
You mean you have other
you
policies?
can't- you could not have, you think it's unrealistic to have schools adopting, and it's unrealistic for them to develop and adopt what could be very well a model, at the very least, model school board association policy to implement September 1st?
Becomes law, let's just say by May 1st, instead of pushing it somewhat out, but not that far out.
Yeah.
You could definitely have a model policy out by the end of the school year that boards could look at over the summer and have in place
Okay,
by September 1st. And
There it
I'm
is.
gonna push it. I totally get, you wanna have it in place at the start of the school year, I totally get.
I think it'll be, not that it will be easy, but it will be easier then. I personally, though, I would say I like that September 1st is clean. I would back into it so that it's the actual first day of school,
Yeah, that's fine.
you know? I don't know.
well, what's wrong with September? Well, wait a minute, not all
First day
schools
of
start
school
the
is
same
August.
day.
August.
But then different boards can have it ready to go.
He knows what I mean.
How often, what's the difference, 3 days? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And if, and even if you pick,
Let's see, calendar.
just talking this out, you pick the September 1st date for the effectiveness of the policy. If the school board is working on that policy in May, June, and July, the board can, once the school board adopts their policy, it's effective regardless of whether or not the statute says September 1st. The school board has adopted this policy on August 1st, and it's going into effect the first day of school.
Or we can't say no later than. That's too squishy.
I would say by August 25th. That's.
Can we, we gotta get August 25th?
I think so.
I don't know. I mean, I'd like to
are
hear
you
what
wi-
they have to say right
Are you okay with August 25th?
Becky, do you?
Because you're gonna have a model policy before then, and they're gonna be able to work on it, and they can,
25th.
is that a Monday? What are we
Yeah,
talking
it's a
about?
Monday.
You're saying that you don't think any schools will start before then, so you're capturing all the schools. August 25th. If you have August 25th, are we capturing all the schools if it's August 25th?
We don't know that.
Round is usually a week or two earlier, but they'd be the only one. They may not be impacted by.
Are we gonna worry about one?
But if we
Yeah.
do September 1, just August 25th is a strange date.
It is a strange date,
They will make it.
September
If you
1.
take September 1,
Did you
if
live
they
at
start
September
on
1?
August 28th,
I
they're
don't
going
agree,
to,
but I
It's-
can
it's
live
they
with
want
six
to
days.
it.
implement it on August
I-
28th,
I
September
just-
1st.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's not like, they can get away with it for 6 days and then all of a sudden on the 1st, all the cell phones are gonna go away. That's not gonna happen. That's the fear, right? That there'll be no policy for 6 days and all of a sudden there'll be a policy?
Okay, so where do I?
Unless you want to say at the beginning of the school year,
No.
but
It's
there
a
is no
date.
such date.
Date.
All right, so we would need that with respect to the effective dates in both bills, the dates shall be we recommend that the effective dates with respect to both bills be September 1, 2025.
Yes.
Okay, so all that I've done is I have taken line 13, see how it says 3? I put effective date and I put this act shall take effect September 1st, 2025.
Right.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion to that
Yes.
effect. Do I have a,
Is there a second?
Do you, once you, does it have to say after its passage? Does it have to say, did you add that?
I just,
It doesn't need to.
I
This act
copied
shall take
exactly what
effect
was here.
September 1.
Oh, yeah, yeah, not after
2025.
its passage, forget it. Yeah, I
Okay.
said that.
All
Is there a
right.
second?
Yeah, second,
Call the roll, please.
Representative Hall?
yes.
Representative Litchfield is yes. Representative Terry?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so here, we did not take out the appropriation or make any recommendations with respect to the appropriation in 781, all right? So I think we send both bills over, and the full committee can decide whether it wants to include any money or not. And that's I think with what we've done here, I think it's marvelous. But for us to sit here and make our recommendation about whether there should be money isn't going to amount to a hill of beans, because once it gets over there, you're going to get everybody's opinion as to whether that should be. And nobody here is going to carry the weight with respect to that. Well,
Okay.
I mean, I don't have that influence. So that
Not
being
like
the
that.
case, I would recommend that we have a motion to recommend that HB 781 FN be retained, because it has to be acted upon by Wednesday.
Even though I disagree, even though I don't support it, I will make a recommendation. No, you make the recommendation to be retained.
I
I'll
don't make the
second.
recommendation to retain.
Is there a
And I'll
second?
second it.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Representative Hall?
Yes,
Representative Litchfield? And Representative Terry?
Yes. So in effect now, we're sending over two identical bills, except that we are saying that we have no recommendation about the one, but we say that we recommend that the other be retained. So by not saying anything about the bill that does not have an early date, then this gives the committee chair the latitude to schedule further consideration of both bills later on in the months of March, April, whatever. And I have the sense that this is not going to be sat on. We're going to act on this soon.
can I actually take my vote back on that, on the retained? I mean, I think there shouldn't be any money on this at this point. We're not, so if I do that, if I vote no on the retained, it's still gonna be 2-1?
It's still going to be 2-1.
Yeah, let's do it 2-1.
And that,
I just feel like we're kicking the
I don't
can
want
down.
Well,
to
the
retain
road.
it either.
Huh?
I don't want to retain it either.
Oh,
Why don't we just let the committee decide? Is that okay with you, Chairman Terry?
that's what I would rather.
if we don't have an agreement here that we recommend retain, then we're kicking it to the full committee as to what they want to do. And you know what? The full committee is going to do what it wants to do anyway. They're either going to accept or reject the retain. And if somebody can recommend retain, and they don't need us to do that.
Sure.
So, I had no idea how this was going to go today, and I just want to thank both of you.
Okay.
I've never chaired a subcommittee before,
It's great.
and I think all of us did a really fine job with help from the bleachers, and
Yeah.
thank you for your service today.
Thank you.
Thank you.